Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin the portion of this panel with, the portion of this Scholars Day room with the theses. The first thesis presentation is going to be by Mr. Evan Wheatley. His thesis director is Dr. Rebecca Jones, and the title is Finding Christ in Cinema, Engaging in Secular Film Theologically. So please welcome Mr. Evan Wheatley.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. So for me as a teenager, films were merely a form of entertainment. A trip to the movies meant the chance to escape to a galaxy far, far away, to stand alongside Harry Potter in his latest confrontation with Lord Voldemort. What I didn't realize at the time, however, were the parallels between the Force in Star Wars and the Christian God, or how Harry and Voldemort's cinematic struggle can be seen as an allegory for the fight between good and evil. My interest in engaging film theologically began at a fall film retreat with OBU assistant professor Dr. Brandon O'Brien at OBU in 2015. He stressed that 4 questions should be posed when attempting to examine a film theologically. Does this film warrant or inspire theological reflection? Does it affirm or illustrate a theological conviction that I hold? Does it challenge or undermine a theological conviction that I hold? And what does this film say or imply about God, humanity, and the world we live in? As I mentioned earlier, I loved movies growing up, but I attended a church that made a clear distinction between secular and Christian film. That being that a Pixar movie is entertaining, but Facing the Giants is entertaining and God-breathed. And after attending Sundance, I found this line of thought troubling. War Room, directed by the Kendrick brothers, was one of my favorite experiences cinematically of 2015, but its message, like most Christian films, is surface level. Tony Jordan, a pharmaceutical salesman, has become self-obsessed, often neglecting his wife and daughter to pursue his work. When his wife, Elizabeth, becomes suspicious that Tony is cheating on her, she begins to meet with the elderly Miss Clara, who suggests that to fight the enemy, she must start by getting down on her knees and praying. One might compare this to a film trilogy like The Lord of the Rings. Amidst the intense violence of this visually stunning fantasy epic, there are several examples of religious symbolism that surface amid reflection, such as the Gandalf the Grey returning from the dead as Gandalf the White, Aragorn, coming from the wilds as a lone ranger, rising to king of Middle-earth, or even Frodo's struggle carrying the Ring of Power, which mirrors our own daily struggle with temptation and sin. Interestingly, however, interviews with the film's director, Peter Jackson, indicate that evoking a spiritually nourishing cinematic experience was not his top priority when creating the adaptation. And yet, for me at least, God was still able to speak powerfully through it. The recent emergence of the OBU at Sundance course is but one of many examples of a larger movement of dialogue between the church and Hollywood. Other examples include the addition of theology and film courses to the curriculums of Christian colleges and seminaries, film festivals such as the City of Angels Film Festival and the Dama Film Festival, which seek to promote discussion about film from a spiritual perspective, and even prominent church and ministry organizations adopting film as a resource for their ministries. Time magazine film critic Richard Corliss summarizes this development. For decades, America has embraced a baffling contradiction. The majority of its people are church-going Christians, many of them evangelical, yet its mainstream pop culture, especially film, is secular at best, often raw and irreligious. It's hard to see these two vibrant strains of society ever coexisting or learning from each other, and yet the two are not only meeting, they're also sitting down and breaking bread together. At Sundance, I was able to learn from secular film. Attending each screening with an analytical eye, I sought to look past the film's face value and search for theological truths and challenges presented in its narrative. This experience left me with a thirst for continued dialogue that is yet to be quenched. Unfortunately, there are pockets of the church that are still hesitant to break bread with Hollywood, or even refuse to do so altogether. Through this thesis, I advocate that we abandon the notion that secular film cannot be spiritually nourishing, and instead embrace film's potential to communicate truth, reveal, redeem, and even change lives. I will approach this by analyzing 3 secular films from different genres and eras of cinema, and explain what they have to say about God, humanity, and the world we live in. Before doing this, however, I will begin with a few insights from Christian author and professor Dr. Robert Johnston and Christian author and filmmaker Dr. Craig Detweiler. In his book, Real Spirituality, Theology in Film and Dialogue, Johnston identifies 5 primary theological approaches to film criticism: avoidance, caution, dialogue, appropriation, and divine encounter, with avoidance being the predominant approach in the early years of the film industry, and appropriation and divine encounter emerging as the popular viewpoints today. There are those who have expressed the view of avoidance to a harsh extreme, such as politician and Christian author Herbert Miles, who said in 1947, "They, movies, are the organ of the devil, the idol of sinners, the sink of infamy, the stumbling block to human progress, the moral cancer of civilization, the number one enemy of Jesus Christ." But most who choose to adopt this posture usually do so from an ethical standpoint. According to media critic Dr. Ted Baer, many films should either not be shown, or Christians should protest them by abstaining from the theater and waiting for them to be released on DVD or Blu-ray, where they can then be viewed selectively. In spite of some still clinging to this posture, avoidance of cinema and mainstream media altogether in today's world is impractical. A more common attitude among conservative Christ followers is that of caution. While most Christians recognize that complete abstinence from the entertainment industry is not an effective approach, there are still many who worry about the industry's influence on themselves, their children, and those around them. While Johnston asserts that viewer discrimination is obviously necessary for Christians of all ages, so too is sensitivity and maturity in film viewing. And that's why, in my opinion, we must move past these first two approaches and enter into a dialogue with film. When entering the movie theater, it is vital to leave the issues of the outside world at the door in order to fully immerse oneself in the movie-going experience and have the potential to interact into a dialogue with it. And to be clear, I'm not purporting that theology is secondary to watching movies. Rather, I'm saying that to engage in a theological dialogue, one must first consider the film's aesthetic experience. The last two theological approaches, appropriation and divine encounter, are based in dialogue, but they expound upon its concept. Those who ascribe to appropriation believe that film is capable of shaping the lives of its viewers, and Johnston, who adheres closely to this view, states that appropriation is inevitable, and that for people to appropriate a movie's insights, the beliefs and values presented in a film don't even have to be Christian or religious. And finally, Johnston discusses divine encounter, which he claims to have experienced with two films over the course of his life. Christian author Edward McNulty equates a divine encounter to an aha moment, where the Holy Spirit grabs our attention and makes us aware of something significant in a film, which often results in a life change or spiritual growth. With divine encounter, however, can come conviction, a theological or moral revelation that unsettles viewers in ways that point to God or the gospel. I had an unsettling experience such as this at Sundance 2016 with the short film This Way Up. The film tells the story of a hard-working middle-aged man living in a Los Angeles storm drain who finds out that his daughter is coming to visit him. In an effort to conceal what's become of his life, he enlists the help of a homeless teen named Luke and bonds with him. And when I was watching this film, I was frustrated initially with the father's decision to conceal what's become of his life to his daughter and not ask for help. But I later realized that I'm just as prideful as he is. Rather than seeking assistance when enduring a spiritual or emotional struggle, I often mask my pain from those around me and attempt to conceal it from God, foolishly thinking that I can overcome it on my own. But the truth is that if I had sought the Lord's help from the beginning, he would have sustained and strengthened me, just as the daughter would have helped her father if he had only asked her. And I've been reminded of this truth recently in the midst of a frustrating season of life. For those of you who don't know, over the past few months, I've dealt with some uncertain health issues, uncertain as to what's been causing them. And I've been kind of on a wild goose chase for the past few months, trying to figure out what exactly has been going on. I was first diagnosed with mitral valve prolapse, which we believe to be the cause of it. But yesterday I had a cardiologist appointment, and it was determined that that was not the cause of it, and that he believes it to be something gastrointestinal. And so anyway, comparing this, or coupling this with 2 part-time jobs and a hectic final semester, that just wasn't a very good combination, and it has impacted me. But at first I was prideful, kind of like the father. I specialize in overloading my schedule, and I've always multitasked well. So I thought to myself, why would this be any different? But after an emergency room visit, multiple spells of not being able to breathe at night, and constant discomfort, the Lord reminded me of my experience with the film This Way Up. Letting go of my pride was difficult, to say the least, but by fully trusting in my God, I found a peace that surpasses all understanding. Detweiler draws on biblical examples for his argument that secular film may convey divine truth, and he parallels these examples with stories presented in contemporary film to argue for the theological significance of the material in that film. Through the brief analysis of Toy Story, The Breakfast Club, and Forrest Gump, I too will attempt to make this argument and illustrate its validity. I've chosen these films in particular because each one speaks to a broad audience. Each analysis will be linked to a different spiritual theme and accompanying scripture related to that theme. Additionally, lyrics from some of the film's key songs will be used as ways to preface or enhance the discussions. The films are ordered in such a way that with each one, the themes of the films become a little less neat and tidy and more convicting. And like my experience with This Way Up, you too may have had or may experience today an uncomfortable experience with one of these films. But instead of turning away from this, I implore you to embrace the truth that God communicates through it and use it as a way to challenge your theological convictions and strengthen your faith.
I was on top of the world, living high, right in my pocket. I was living the life, things were just the way they should be. Went from out of the sky like a bomb, comes some little punk in a rocket. Now all of a sudden, some strange things are happening to me.
Buzz Lightyear to the rescue!
Strange things are happening to me. Strange things. Strange things are happening to me. No doubt about it. I have friends, I lost some friends. Now all my friends are gone, and I'm doing the best I can to carry on. I had power, I was respected, but not anymore. And I've lost the love of the one whom I adore. Let me tell you about a strange things are happening to me. Strange things. Strange things are happening to me. Ain't no doubt about it. Strange things.
When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 11:2. I was on top of the world. It was right in my pocket. I was living the life. Things were just the way they should be. When from out of the sky like a bomb comes some little punk in a rocket. Now all of a sudden, some strange things are happening to me. The films of Pixar, as for many millennials, were an integral part of my childhood, and the original Toy Story will always hold a special place in my heart. The film chronicles the lives of the toys of a young boy named Andy, particularly the everyday life of Woody, a suave, cowboy-like sheriff with an ego. Heralded as Andy's favorite toy, Woody is admired and respected by the other toys, who view him as an authority figure. All is well with Woody until one day Andy receives a Buzz Lightyear action figure, a space ranger, unaware of the fact that he is a toy. As Buzz grows in popularity with Andy and the other toys, Woody's world is turned upside down. The downward spiral of Woody from hero to zero happens in one quick sequence. Overjoyed about his new Buzz Lightyear, Andy darts to his bedroom and plops Buzz's cardboard spaceship onto his bed, knocking Woody onto the floor in the process. And then within a 2-minute segment of Randy Newman's Strange Things, Buzz becomes a role model to the other toys. Andy changes the theme of his room to Buzz Lightyear, and he starts sleeping next to Buzz at night instead of Woody, forcing the sheriff to sleep in the chest at the end of Andy's bed with all of the other toys. No matter who you are, there's always someone more skilled, more fortunate, or more talented than you. While this is an easy truth to remind yourself when experiencing failure, it's far more difficult to embrace when that same success is personified in front of you, as it was for Woody with Buzz. And yet God calls us to rise above pride and jealousy when faced with this. However, as human beings, we are often stubborn, and Woody, even as a toy, is no different. Woody attempts to get rid of Buzz as soon as the opportunity arises by using the remote control car RC to push him out of Andy's 2-story window. The other toys quickly catch on to Woody's ploy, however, and subsequently push Woody out of the same window. Upon landing in the bushes, he finds Buzz alive and well, which excites Woody not because he cares about Buzz's well-being, but because of this, he can go upstairs, try to reason with the toys, and save his own skin. After various conundrums and a run-in with the Claw at Pizza Planet, Buzz and Woody wind up as captives of Sid, a malevolent child with a love of blowing up toys and experimenting with them in weird ways. With Buzz strapped to a rocket and Woody trapped under a blue box, the toys have truly hit rock bottom at the beginning of the film's third act. It is precisely this predicament, however, that causes Woody to see the error of his ways. Buzz, I can't do this without you. I need your help. I can't help. I can't help anyone. Why would Andy want me? Why would Andy want you? Look at you. You're a Buzz Lightyear. Any other toy would give up his moving parts just to be you. You got wings. You glow in the dark. You talk. Your helmet does that whoosh thing. You are a cool toy. As a matter of fact, you're too cool. I mean, what chance does a toy like me have against a Buzz Lightyear? I should be the one strapped to that rocket. Buzz then proceeds to look at the Andy written on his right foot. It's the same writing that is inscribed on Woody's foot, and it's the one thing that they have in common. Buzz then proceeds to help his newfound friend escape from SIDS and return home to their owner. Whether we're jealous of others' success, refuse to allow others and God to help us, or simply hold ourselves in higher regard than anyone else, we do well to take a note or two from Woody and his journey from sheriff on his high horse to humble leader and friend. Regardless of what situation you're in life, your life has value. You are loved by the King. And in the enduring words of Randy Newman, some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am. Bigger and stronger too. Maybe. But they'll never love you the way I do. It's me and you, boy. And as the years go by, our friendship will never die. You're going to see. It's our destiny. You've got a friend in me. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." 1 Samuel 16:7. A brain, a beauty, a jock, a rebel, and a recluse, all trapped in a library for 9 hours during Saturday detention, and each tasked with writing a 1,000-word essay on who they think they are. How could a group of high school students with this composition coexist even for a few minutes, let alone 9 hours? While the students are initially standoffish, they eventually let go of their preconceived notions about one another and opt for transparency. The Breakfast Club promotes a timeless message: don't judge a book by its cover. My reasoning for discussing this film is not to give any sort of profound insight, but to argue that an R-rated dramedy with a fair amount of cursing and occasional innuendo can still warrant theological reflection. Carla DeVito's song, which you just heard, "We Are Not Alone," that the students dance to in glorious 80s fashion midway through the film, perfectly captures the essence of its message. As John Bender props himself up on top of a statue and headbangs to DeVito's rock song, you may see a rebellious delinquent with no respect for himself or those around him. What you cannot see, however, are the bruises underneath his sleeves and the emotional scars stemming from years of verbal and physical abuse from his father. Meanwhile, Claire Standish dances near the stairs, and Andrew Clark plays air guitar on the ground floor. At first glance, you see an attractive, pampered, and spoiled rich girl and a jock with an ego goofing off. Look again. Dancing on the staircase is a young lady who wishes she didn't have to put up a facade to be liked by the popular crowd. By jamming on the air guitar and bonding with his newfound friends, Andrew has thought for himself for the first time in a while. He is constantly trying to impress his dad, who expects him to excel in sports and be cool in school, meaning that Andrew needs to be as big of a jerk as his father was when he was Andrew's age. Brian, who turned on DeVito's song in the first place, may appear to be having a great time. And he is. The euphoria of the moment overshadows a recent dip in self-esteem, stemming from an F he made on his woodshop test. And as you do a double take at Allison Reynolds ridiculously crumpling to the floor at the end of the song, you realize that she didn't do anything wrong to end up in Saturday detention with her fellow students. She didn't have any friends. She simply had nothing better to do. These intimate details are revealed by the characters to each other in a 25-minute segment near the film's conclusion. As they sit in a circle on the second floor of the library, they laugh, cry, and yell at one another. They reveal deep secrets, share hidden talents, and comment on the absurdity of society. What's going to happen to us on Monday when we're all together again? I mean, I consider you guys my friends. I'm not wrong, am I? Brian asks. Do you want the truth? Claire replies. I don't think so. That's a real nice attitude, Claire, Andrew remarks sarcastically. Oh, be honest, Andy. If Brian came walking up to you on Monday in the middle of the hallway, what would you do? I mean, picture this. You're there with all the sports. I know exactly what you'd do. You'd say hi to him, and when he left, you'd cut him up so all your friends didn't think you really liked him. And when Bender degrades Claire for making these statements, she responds with, Okay, what about you, you hypocrite? Why don't you take Allison to one of your heavy metal vomit parties? Or take Brian out to the parking lot at lunch to get high? What about Andy, for that matter? What about me? While this unlikely band of five is able to overcome this seemingly inevitable truth, Claire's right. Most of us, even after bonding with those outside of our own social class, would just as quickly pretend that they didn't exist the following Monday. Why is this? Why do we care so much about what everyone else thinks of us? Jesus didn't. He broke bread with prostitutes and tax collectors and touched the untouchable. People who were completely unlike him were drawn to his presence. And if we can't say the same thing about our own lives, then what does that say about our walk with the Lord? Yes, there is a reasonable amount of foul language in The Breakfast Club. Sex is talked about more than once, and each of the students gets high on screen. This is not a film for children, young teenagers, or the spiritually immature, and Christians should take due caution when considering watching a film such as this. However, I believe the overall message of The Breakfast Club and the theological truths gleaned from it far outweigh its negative aspects. It is a film that has challenged me to live a life characterized by genuine faith and unconditional love. Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong, but we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. You see us as you want to see us, in the simplest terms, in the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete, and a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely, The Breakfast Club.
Why are you so good to me?
You're my girl.
I'll always be your girl.
Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Psalm 139, 7-8. Me and Jenny goes together like peas and carrots. To me, Forrest and Jenny's relationship reflects Christ's unconditional love for his church. At the beginning of creation, God intended for us to be the peas to his carrots, living in perfect harmony with him and creation. Forrest and Jenny have this sort of bond as children. They sit by each other on the school bus, play together, and often watch the stars at night from the branch of their favorite tree. However, as Jenny grows older and moves to college, she forgets all about Forrest and her rebellious nature begins to kick in. She has premarital sex and begins to explore alcohol and drug use, gateway experiences that will lead her down a darker path later in the film. Even after Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, God immediately set in motion his grand plan to redeem all of creation. And even after Jenny scolds Forrest for beating up a boy who she was parking with because he thought she was hurting her, there Forrest still stands in the pouring rain holding a box of chocolates. He has her best interests at heart, as God always has ours. No matter how many times we depart from his presence, Jesus is always there to welcome us with open arms. He is intentional in his pursuit, beckoning us to turn around and come back to him. Forrest does the same with Jenny. He writes to her daily during his service in Vietnam, and while he is overseas risking his life so that she may have freedom, she abuses that same freedom by destroying her body with experimental drugs and chasing the pleasures of this world. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus paid the price for not only our past sins, but also for sins we are committing now and will commit in the future. He paid the price for the freedom that we have abused in the past and will abuse in the future. And as Forrest makes good work of anyone who treats Jenny wrongly, so too does Jesus fight our battles for us. And when we come before him and ask for forgiveness, he not only welcomes us, but like the father in the parable of the prodigal son and Forrest at the Washington Monument, he joyfully runs out to embrace us and forgive us. You died on a Saturday morning, and I had you placed here under our tree. Mama always said dying was a part of life. I sure wish it wasn't. Sin and death were not a part of God's original plan for his people. As Forrest weeps for Jenny following her passing, so too does Jesus weep for Lazarus in the Gospels, and weep for every member of his church who dies today. However, because of Jesus' unconditional love for us displayed through his death and resurrection, there is hope for all who call upon his name. Why are you so good to me? Jenny asks Forrest. You're my girl, Forrest answers, almost surprised. I'll always be your girl, and we will always belong to Christ. Late film critic Roger Ebert once said, "We live in a box of space-time. Movies are windows in its walls. They allow us to enter other minds, not simply in the sense of identifying with the characters, although that is an important part of it, but by seeing the world as another person sees it." Perhaps up to this point you have not considered interacting with secular film theologically. Like me, prior to taking the OBU at Sundance course, to you the idea that God could use Star Wars to provide spiritual nourishment, or Harry Potter, a saga entirely based around magic, the fact that that could enrich your faith is foreign or even ludicrous to you. Perhaps you still feel this way. If that is the case, consider this proposition. Put Ebert's quote into practice. Take one of your favorite films and act like you're watching it for the first time. God may just have something to say to you through it. However, for those interested in further exploring the concept of engaging secular film theologically, remember Dr. Brandon O'Brien's questions before doing so. Fortunately, the 5 films discussed in my paper and the resources cited in that paper, and the 3 films I specifically talked about today, do not form an exhaustive list on the subject. The past holds cinematic gems just waiting to be unearthed, and new films are released every week, so I implore you to keep talking about movies and keep going out to watch them. A divine encounter may be in store. All you have to do is press play. Thank you.